Hmm, what's on the agenda today? Ah, that's right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Skeleton's Library. After being too lazy to read, I have finally finished The Martians, the true story of an alien craze that captured turn of the century America, by David Barron. For convenience's sake, I'm going to shorten that and just refer to it as The Martian. I'm sure you can understand. I have really stumbled across this book completely by accident. It got suggested to me on Amazon as I was scrolling, and its description really grabbed me. It reads as follows: There is life on the planet Mars. New York Times, December 9, 1906. This New York Times headline was no joke. In the early 1900s, many Americans actually believed we had discovered intelligent life on Mars. His best-selling science writer David Barron chronicles in The Martians his truly bizarre tale of a nation swept up in Mars mania. At the center of Barron's historical drama is Percival Lowell. Lowell devised the grand theory that the Red Planet was home to a utopian society that had built gargantuan ditches to funnel precious meltwater from the polar ice caps to desert farms and oasis cities. The public fell in love with the ambitious amateur astronomer who shared his findings in speeches and widely popular books. While at first people treated the Martians whimsically, Martians headlined Broadway shows, biologists speculating whether they were winged or gilled, the discussion quickly became serious. Inventor Nikola Tesla announced he had received radio signals from Mars. Alexander Graham Bell agreed there was no escape from the conviction that intelligent beings inhabited the planet. Martian excitement reached its zenith when Lowell financed an expedition to photograph Mars from Chile's Atacama Desert, resulting in what newspapers hailed as proof of the Martian canal's existence. Triumph quickly yielded to tragedy. Those wild claims and highly speculative photos emboldened Lowell's critics, whose withering attacks gathered steam. Eventually wrecked the man and his theory, but not the fervor he had started. Although Lowell would die discredited and delusional in 1916, the Mars frenzy spurred a nascent literary genre called science fiction. The world's sense of its place in the universe would never be the same. Today, the Red Planet maintains its grip on the public's imagination. Many see Mars as civilization's destiny, their first step toward our becoming an interplanetary species. But, as David Barron demonstrates, this tendency to project our hopes onto the world next door is hardly new. Martians is a scintillating and necessary reminder that while we look to Mars for answers, what we often find are mirrors of ourselves. Now, isn't that such a grabbing description? It really snagged my imagination and got me wanting to learn more, so I bought the book pretty much instantly. Before we get into the review, I had a friend tell me he wanted to give a little advice pertinent to the book. So let's cut to him real quick.
This is Advice with Edgar Allan Puppet. Believe only half of what you see and nothing that you hear. This has been Advice with Edgar Allan Puppet.
David Barron does a really good job structuring this book in a narrative frame, making it so we follow not just the progression of society and their views on Mars, but the life of Percival Lowell, the man who really represented the Mars mania of that age. He intertwines these two things alongside the moments of other important characters at the time in a way that's very easy to follow. You never get confused or lost, and he tops it off well by occasionally talking about his own current day journeys into these places as he did his research for the book. It all makes for a really cohesive look at the topic that anyone can just hop right into. Another thing that's really nice and adds to this effect is all the drawings and pictures Barron includes in the book. They're pretty heavily scattered throughout, feeling like there's one or two every couple pages. It really helps you get a peek into that time period. It almost feels like a little museum exhibit. Ultimately, this is a story about sensationalism and a great example of confirmation bias in action. I couldn't help but be charmed by it though. Maybe because it was ultimately unharmful delusions rather than the more crazy stuff I'm used to today. But it was almost refreshing just to read about how people and society marveled about the idea of life on Mars and that it was a peaceful society. There wasn't much fear mongering, this childhood belief in another civilization that was more advanced than us and friendly. A sort of mass hysteria, but also one of dreaming. And people assumed better and let their imaginations run in an era where they were constantly pushing new grounds in technology. It really captures that this felt like the era of dreams. Claims about people going to the North Pole finally being achieved, and the quirky inventions and claims of Tesla. Baron transports you back then, and almost makes you wish you were there, in this era of exploration, dreams, and accomplishing the impossible. I really liked getting to see bits and pieces of so many recognizable figures, and learning how they contributed to the Mars mania of the past. Reading about H.G. Wells and his creation of World of Wars. What the fuck did I just say? Creation of the War of the Worlds. Why did I had that really wrote like can't talk. I had that really written weird in the script. And how he later talked to Percival Lowell. Found his theories believable, or reading about how Tesla was trying to make a device to communicate with Martians. It was really interesting learning about these famous historical figures, and it honestly made me want to read a Tesla biography in the collection of H.G. Wells' work that I have. Barron does a really good job at providing the context of the time and touching on how the racial views of the time, particularly Orientalism, in a lot of cases affected how people saw or dreamed of Mars, and how drawing, inventing, and adventuring was really something only elites could afford to do. Adventuring was seen as a gentleman's activity. Astronomy was pretty much all funded through the means of benefactors, or in a lot of cases, rich men like Percival Lowell just becoming astronomers themselves, because they could easily afford the costly output. Even inventors like Tesla's whole life and profession relied on benefactors. In this time of dreams, the most important fuel for them was money, and mainly only the rich could truly afford to try and make their dreams a reality. Lowell is really the main character of this tale, and Barron does a good job at relating his story while not being too judgmental. He states the facts, and actually just seems genuinely interested in Lowell's story, rather than wanting to lamppost his legacy. Lowell really was a Martian Icarus, a man remembered far more by those close to him as a poet, rather than a scientist. He dared to dream and believe, but he also let that dream blind him to the reality around him and the technical aspects of science that he should have been more focused on. He was a man who was never wanting, born into the elite, had an extreme ego that led to his fall. But he was also a man struggling with what we now know as depression and likely bipolar disorder. His tale was really interesting to learn about, and I like Byrne's more optimistic outlook on his legacy, and how it ultimately not only pushed science forward, but inspired a next generations of creators in science fiction. It's a very human story, tragedy and part dream. Byrne makes an analogy in this book that really stuck to me, comparing American and Mars to Arthurian tales in England, how they came to life because the Victorian people wanted to believe them. It's a really apt analogy that perfectly makes you click with the mindset at the time, and really stuck out to me because even now, I think Mars is essentially America's Avalon. This magical place in a lot of people's minds they think we will one day be able to colonize. That's another reason this tale of the past stuck to me. Mars mania has never left us, just changed in its scope and ideas. Overall, this is an easy book to recommend. It is a very specific story and topic though. I know some people are more interested in nonfiction when it's mainly about the bigger things in history like great wars or true crime. So if that's more to your taste, then you might not like this smaller part of history. If you're willing to give it a shot, or just interested in things that essentially led to the birth of science fiction though, this book is an easy read for anyone. That's all for today. Remember that it's okay to dream, just don't let them consume you. And I will see you next time.